I think a lot of Baylor fans were impressed by the Bears defense, even in that loss to Utah on Saturday. Dave Aranda, their head coach and play caller, he had something else to say.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Gametime and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. And today, we are just one day out from Air Force waltzing into Waco to take on the Bears. Happy Friday the 13th to you, by the way. But looking at that Air Force game, we broke down a bit of the Falcons yesterday. We're going to look back at something Coach Aranda said yesterday about his team's defense, which has been receiving a lot of praise this week. He kind of goes a different direction with it. And I'm looking at the running back position. We talk about how important that is for the Bears and for their success. Do they need to look at just one or two guys? We'll take a look at that, and a big historical celebration this weekend for the Miracle on the Brazos 1974 Southwest Conference champs. Why that might be the most important team in Baylor football history. All that is coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Starting with the Bears defense. Because coming out of that 23-12 loss to Utah last week, I think a lot of us were optimistic about the defense. I certainly was and am and have been. I thought they were excellent in week one, but there's only so much you can take from a game against an FCS opponent with their quarterback hurt. And I thought they were really impressive in game two, even when Rising was in there, because that's what people are going to, even still today, people are going to comment on this video saying, well, it's because Cam Rising wasn't in there. Of course that helped. Of course that helped. But I really thought this Baylor defense was playing in a style that really suits them when Rising was in the game. And they were holding Utah off the scoreboard in drives that, started outside the 5-yard line. They really only allowed one touchdown drive on the day. They pitched a second half shutout, and it really gave them a chance to get back into the game, a chance that they didn't really take, but absolutely left them out there with a chance. So I've been impressed, man. Keaton Thomas and Jackie Marshall, Caden Jenkins settled in, played a nice game. Devin Bobby, same thing. He made some mistakes early, but settled in, had a nice game. Matt Jones had, I think, 8 or 9 tackles by himself as well. Keaton Thomas led the team in that category. So I think there's some good, bright spots, and I like Dave Aranda calling this defense. Clearly, that is his bag. That's what he can do. That's what he brings a team. And at the coach's show this week, John Morris asked him about the play of his defense. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, the answer that Dave Aranda went with is not one that I was expecting. He went down a different direction. And whether he's right or not, well, let's listen in.
23-12 was the final, but 2 of the scores by Utah. One was on a blocked field goal, returned for a touchdown. Another was a strip sack and a 3-yard drive. So, that's 14 points right there. I guess they missed an extra point, so 13 points. Mm-hmm. But the defense, I think, did really, really well the entire game.
Yeah, I thought the guys fought hard. I thought our execution needs to be better. I think that and then I think we've got to be able to play more younger players in the game. In the first game we played a bunch of people. In this game we really kind of played the starters. At that last drive we had an opportunity to get off the field, give our offense yet another opportunity, and we couldn't do it until a couple conversions later. And I think if we would have played younger guys earlier in the game, our starters would be fresh. There was a timeout, and we're calling the defense up, and Matt Jones is like on all fours, just barely being able to breathe. We had a couple other guys that are that way, so they put it all out there. But, we've got to get some guys more up to speed in terms of execution and counting on and trusting and all that, so that they're in those moments. And so I think there's some growth that needs to happen there. And then, I think we can get to where we're a defense that we need to be.
Yeah.
I think you get it from the first sentence there. Dave is kind of like, yeah, but we could have done better here. We could have executed better. I like the way he said, well, I like the way we fought. And that is the sound of a somewhat disgruntled football coach. And you guys know me. I love analyzing Dave Aranda's press conference answers, and I am looking for anything that is going to break the mold from the typical Dave Aranda, which can be just a lot of minutia, a lot of analogies and visual stuff that we can't really get over the printed word from the transcript. So I'm always looking for something that gives us a little bit of emotion, a little bit peek inside Dave Aranda. It doesn't happen often. I think he got a good one there. To be totally honest with you guys, I know you're listening and thinking that's not earth-shattering. I like it, though. This is a coach. He doesn't call out any players in particular on who needs to be better, but there is a narrative of, this is a good defensive football team. They had a really good week against Utah. This is something that this team can hang their hat on in the future. And Dave Aranda in that answer is basically saying, well, not so fast. We're not where we need to be. It's been a good start. We've only given up 26 points on the year. That's 13 a game. But it's a start. It's not where we need to be, because here's where we failed, and some things that you might not notice from the scoreboard or might not even notice from watching the game. And I love that he pointed that out, because it was something I was thinking about at the time, but I hadn't brought it up yet, so that's on me. But and it's felt like nitpicking a little bit, but this is what the head coach is looking at, and he's talking about that drive in the fourth quarter. Okay, so Baylor forcing a bunch of 3-and-outs in this game. It goes punt, missed field goal, punt, and all of those are under 3:10. The longest drive they have is 3:09 in that span, which does start with Rising in the game, by the way, in the second quarter. So everything after that is Baylor getting them off the field pretty early. And then all of a sudden, in the fourth quarter, Baylor punts the ball away to Utah with 11:03 left on the clock. And the Utes do not give the ball back up until there's 3:40 left in the football game. That, my friends, that is seeing a game out. That is the pinnacle of like a team that knows how to win. It's cliche. We just throw it out there, but that's your example right there. They didn't even need to take the training wheels off of Isaac Wilson. They just said, let's get a couple of first downs. Let's reestablish the line of scrimmage, which is what they did. They kept the ball on the ground a lot. They end up missing a field goal, which kind of keeps Baylor in it, but it's a 2-score game. It's going to be a 2-score game no matter what, if they make the field goal. It's a 2-score game, and we're giving you 3:40 on the clock. Think about that. Baylor punting it away with 11 minutes left and thinking, this is only 2 scores. We're in the game here. Let's just get another stop. They do, but it takes up, 7.5 minutes. That's almost as important as a score there for Utah. In fact, in terms of the field goal that was going to make it a 2-score game anyway, that's pretty much just as important, to shave 7.5 minutes off the clock in the fourth quarter. So you look at this, you look down the list, it goes from punt to touchdown, field goal, then punt, missed field goal, punt, missed field goal, end of game. And you're thinking that's a good half for this Bears defense. But it's not good enough, is what Dave Aranda is telling you. Because everything leading up to that in the second half ones were 2 minutes, a minute and a half, 3 minutes, 7.5. That's putting a game on ice without taking a ton of skill. You don't need a quarterback to cut it loose to put a game away when you can execute like that. And they weren't running the football much in the second half, or they weren't running it very effectively in the second half, but they're playing at altitude. It's very hot out there. I'm sure they are taking into account how much Baylor is not rotating in guys on the defensive side of the ball. They run it down your throat just enough to really, take the ball out of your hands, take possessions out of your hands. And that was probably the most important offensive drive for Utah on the whole day. It didn't even amount to points. So I love that Dave's pointing that out. Because as good as it might look, there's work that needs to be done. You need to have more guys rotating in there. He talked about it earlier this week. There's a depth issue on this Baylor defense. And it's something to really take note of, because Air Force Again, not a good offense. But if you give them a couple of windows on third downs and you keep them on the field, that could wear you down for later in the game. Absolutely could. This should be a week where you can manage some more guys in there, but this is a team that at its best can wear you down. And by the way, they're going to altitude again next week. And they're playing another altitude team at home the week after that. So it is something that you're going to need to figure out. And it's going to be in the 90s again this weekend, tomorrow. So it's not, you're not running into fall weather and facing some passing offenses where you're getting the ball a little bit more. No, you're facing some running teams. You're playing at altitude. You're playing altitude teams who are used to being better conditioned than you, and you're playing in the heat. So kudos to Dave there. I know a lot of people won't like that, but kudos to Dave. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. That shows that there's a standard here. Whether they meet it, we'll see. And I know some people don't like that I give more kudos to Dave than I maybe should, but I think that is a good Dave Aranda answer of saying, yeah, it looks good, but here's where we need to get better. And I'm taking that from my head coach any day of the week. The next thing is just correcting it. And we'll see how they can correct it this weekend. We're going to go over that coming up next. Passion, drive, patience. The things that gets you the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. That's where our friends at eBay Motors come in. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, okay? Roof racks, exhaust kits, superchargers, LED headlights, so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber. You're not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home those huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions to apply. That eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to our U.S. customers. And that is ebaymotors.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn. It is the only place you should go if you're looking for a job or if you're looking to hire, okay? Because in any given month, okay, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit any other leading job site. So if you're not looking there, you're looking in the wrong place. And on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So you're hiring professionals like a professional. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You need to as well. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions, those do apply. So flipping over to the offensive side of things, because I'm still trying to figure out what this running game is supposed to look like for the Bears. Okay. I didn't think it was all that impressive in week 1 against Tarleton. It clearly was not very impressive in week 2 against Utah. And I was touting this running back room coming into the season. 4 guys. I thought you legit had 4 guys, especially the way they were talking about Bryson Washington, that you had 4 guys there. Okay, you had Richard Reese, you had Dawson Pendergrass, you had Dominic Richardson, who was the starter last year, and you have Bryson Washington. And the more I've seen, these 2 games, I'm wondering what that number actually is. Because it was not a productive week overall running the ball last week, and it was especially unproductive for Dominic Richardson and Richard Reese. So this is now, going on a year plus for Richard Reese and his production dipping after the end of the 2022 season. And we really haven't seen the Dominic Richardson that we were promised in a Baylor uniform. And I'm sure there's plenty of things that go into that. I still don't think this is a stellar offensive line. I think that needs to be said, because it might be a case of it doesn't matter who your runners are if you don't have the hog mollies in front that are going to pave the way for them. But looking at last week, Dominic Richardson, 4 carries for 11 yards. Richard Reese, 9 carries for 15 yards. Dawson Pendergrass, 9 carries for 69 yards. Averaged almost 8 yards a carry. Now, I should mention, 46 of those 69 yards came on 1 play. So therefore, 8 attempts for 23 yards outside of that. And that goes right into Richard Reese, Dominic Richardson territory. So what are you arguing, Cam? Well, I would also argue that that did happen. He did have a 46-yard run, and no one's had that for the Bears this season. That's a long run, and they were just begging for that kind of play in the game last week. And Dawson Pendergrass, I thought, was the most impressive back in week 1. I thought he was the most impressive back all of 2023. So should Dawson Pendergrass just be your bell cow, be your number 1 running back? I think that's a question that is worth asking at this point. That's not to say that none of these other guys will come in and, shake some things up, but Dawson Pendergrass is a hard runner who can give you something in the passing game. I wouldn't call him like a great big pass catching back, but he is a guy who can catch out of the backfield and can be a threat on 3rd and short and packages like that where you need to account for him, the runner, and him, the pass catcher. I think that is a versatility that Baylor can really use. And I think we all, as football fans, enjoy the way he runs the ball. He runs hard. He runs downhill in between the tackles. He's got some deceptive speed. He's not shying away from contact. I think all those things are things you like in a running back. I think another guy who has those attributes, but we haven't really seen much on the football field, is one that Dave Aranda says is getting close to coming back. And that is the 4th guy in this equation, Bryson Washington, the sophomore from Franklin. I'm basing a lot of this off what I saw in high school. I watched him play a lot in high school at Franklin. They run a slot T, so it's a lot of hard, tough running. And Bryson Washington was the epitome of that. Won back-to-back state championships with the Lions, man. He is a dude out there. Like, you talk about not shying away from contact. This guy can run you over and then run past the safety. Like, he has that kind of skill, that thunder and lightning all rolled into one. The things you are trying to make a composite for in these other backs, Dawson Pendergrass can give you a little bit of the thunder, and Richard Reese can give you the lightning, or do it with Dominic Richardson, whatever. Bryson Washington, in terms of his game and his attributes, should have both of those things. And I think it's something that Baylor has missed. I think he's one that they would have loved to have put in some more packages last year, and then, of course, the beginning of this year, but he's been battling some injuries. Because that is a guy who can give you a real nice change of pace. And when you are trying to wear out this Air Force defense, which I think is what Baylor's going to be trying to do, obviously they're going to hopefully try and figure some things out in the passing game, but I think it's going to be a very heavy run kind of offense against Air Force. That could be a nice guy to bring in there for a change of pace. I don't think he's going to be available this weekend, but Dave Aranda did say he was close and mentioned him in his Monday press conference as someone who will be contributing to this team. So as it stands right now, I think Dawson Pendergrass should be getting more carries than the other 2 guys, just off what we've seen these first 2 games, and of which Dominic Richardson's only played 1, but also a good deal of last year. Because so far into week 3 of the season, you're playing with a similar offensive line that you had last year. And it's a few new guys, so there's the hopes that it will get better as the season goes on, and I'm sure it will. I'm not saying it's going to be elite, though. So you're right now dealing with essentially the same production from your offensive line last year that was the worst in the Big 12. So you need some shifty guys who can make guys miss and run over some guys, and Dawson Pendergrass gives you all of that. So should Dawson Pendergrass just be running back 1? I don't even know if they'll ever announce one or what it even means to a coaching staff. But yeah, he should be, I think, your primary back. He gives you the versatility that you are trying to create in the aggregate and the other 2 guys behind him. So I just think he should be getting the lion's share of the carries. We'll keep a lookout for that this week, because, again, this is one where I think they're going to be running the ball a lot. Even against, a team that struggles both against the pass and against the run. I mean, they're okay. They're an okay defense. I'm also taking into account the teams that they have played, neither of which were very good. So, but I think the weeks of him having Dawson Pendergrass, I think the weeks of Dawson Pendergrass having the same amount of carries as Richard Reese should probably be numbered here. Should probably be numbered. I just think until we see more from Richardson and Reese, that those carries should be split a little bit more towards Dawson Pendergrass. But this is a week, also a day on Saturday for Baylor to remember arguably the most important team in their history. And it is one that deserves all the context we can give to it, and one that deserves all the applause that we can give to it. That's coming up on Locked On Baylor. But first, Factor Meals. If you're like me, you don't cook a lot, you don't know how, or you just don't want to, but you also want to keep that healthy lifestyle, look good, feel good about yourself. That's where Factor Meals is going to step in. This is how you kickstart a new healthy routine. With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. So you're going to crush your wellness goals this year because of Factor Meals. Everything from breakfast to dinner to dessert. You can make it all delicious and keep your kitchen time to a minimum. Factor Meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up, and you're getting restaurant quality meals with premium ingredients, okay? Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. You can choose from 6 menu preferences, help you manage calories, maximize your protein intake. You can avoid meat or just go well balanced, which is what I'm trying to do. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE50 at factormeals.com/ LOCKEDONCOLLEGE50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Historic day upcoming for Baylor tomorrow when they take on Air Force. Not so much for the team on the field, but for the old team that will take the field at some point on Saturday. And that is the 1974 Southwest Conference champions coming in to honor the 50th anniversary of that incredible achievement, known mostly for the miracle on the Brazos, upsetting Texas 34-24 in a game that they were down 24-7 at halftime. And I'm sure you guys have seen the trailer, or if not, watched the documentary from Baylor Plus. Some great work there. But they say it a lot in the trailer, and it's kind of tough to think about today, but it rings true. Baylor was in real danger of becoming a complete nothing in college football. And I know a lot of other fans will try to tell you it still is, and it always has been, but it's not. We're talking about Baylor potentially becoming Rice if this didn't happen. This win didn't happen in November 74. It's interesting to look at because they say in the documentary it could have been the end of the Baylor football program. I don't know that there was such a thing that would happen in Texas. I just find it hard to believe, up where I'm from in the Northeast, at a school Baylor size and wasn't producing for decades on decades. Yeah, you cut the football program. It's happened. But in Texas, when I see that SMU was able to maintain a football program through decades of lean years as well, or TCU was able to keep it through lean decades too, Baylor was not good for a long time, but they were far from the only ones in the Southwest Conference. And the example I just used, Rice, is the same way. But you got to think of it even when there are down years for Baylor now, it's a completely different atmosphere in terms of they were playing off campus. I know a lot of you remember that, Floyd Casey or Baylor Stadium back then. They were playing miles off campus. They didn't have any facilities. They didn't have a weight room. I did an interview with JJ Joe. I think I've mentioned this before about Grant Taff, and he was talking about his recruiting trip to Baylor. And they just showed us the stadium and that was it. There was no locker room for us to see that they wanted to show us, or offices, meeting rooms, weight rooms, practice facilities. There was none of that. He was like, they couldn't even scrounge up a Baylor football t-shirt. This was not and I know Grant Taff fought for a long time. Chuck Reedy afterwards fought for him for it when they were making the transition to the Big 12. Like they were saying, we've got to invest here. And investment did not come for a long time. And it really, really kicked in with McLean Stadium and the indoor practice facility. Now we get the Fudge Football Operations Center, and there's so much to show. But a lot of that owes a debt of gratitude to the Miracle on the Brazos. Baylor had not won a conference championship in 50 years. 50 years. So as long as it's been from the Miracle on the Brazos to now, they did not win a conference championship. That is like unthinkable today. It's unthinkable. You know, that we're talking about like Indiana football. Okay? And we like to think that we're somewhere better than that. And we are. We are as a university. But you think it's lean now. I mean, 50 years. And they had some good teams mixed in there. 57, they won the Sugar Bowl. But like, we're talking about not one conference championship in all that time. None of the years that UT were down, Baylor could not pounce on it. Which there weren't many, by the way. But it is kind of unfathomable to think about now. But Baylor football is in a really, really bad place, especially in the early 70s. You'd just gone through the Bill Beal era. They won 3 games in 3 years at that point. They were awful, and there was no intrigue. There was no interest. And I talk about those comparable schools that kept their football programs. One thing to remember, too, is Baylor was not a major university. It was a fairly small Baptist school in a failing town of Waco, if we're being honest. And really up until 25 years ago, there was nothing beyond University Parks. There was nothing on the other side of campus. Like it was just tiny. And it was just a place for, Baptist Texans to go get a good, decent education, a good Christian education. Now it's an R1 university. It is a very, very, very good school. It's as selective as it's ever been. You got people coming from all over the country. It's a national brand. None of that was true in 1974. And a big reason towards moving towards that, however many decades it took, was beating the University of Texas that day. It is something they had not done in a long time. And they had this guy, Grant Taft, young guy, full of vigor, a few years into his tenure. And, he was in a situation not too dissimilar from Dave Aranda right now, trying to figure out if you could win at Baylor and if he could keep his job. The difference now is we know you can win at Baylor, and that guy, Grant Taft, is a big reason why. They're down 24-7 at halftime against a UT team that's 4 years removed from winning the national championship. They were the class of college football in the late 60s into the early 70s. Darrell K. Royal, all this stuff. And all Baylor does is rattle off 27 unanswered to beat the Texas Longhorns, tear down the goalposts, take them into town, leave the lights on all night. It's arguably the biggest win in Baylor football history. It's certainly still in the top 5, and we've had some pretty good wins since then. And my favorite part about the story, I'll wrap it up here, is that Darrell K. Royal, the great Darrell K. Royal, comes into Grant Taft's office after the game to congratulate him and says, that was no fluke. Your team is that good. And they proved it. They didn't just beat Texas. They won the Southwest Conference. And they went to the Cotton Bowl. And that's how you get in the living room of Earl Campbell. That's how you get Mike Singletary to come on. That's how you get back to Southwest Conference championship team in 1980. It starts with 74. And so for those of you who don't know the team, and look, I was long from being born. I was nowhere near knowing that team and knowing everything about that team. And it's too bad that it's kind of lost media, that 74 game against Texas, that Miracle on the Brazos. But for those of you like me who don't know this team all that well, stand up and give them a hell of an applause tomorrow, because that great stadium that you're going to be sitting in and those conference championships that you're going to be looking at and all the great memories you have from Baylor football, you owe a little bit of gratitude to that 74 team. And I hope they get the respect they deserve out there, because it's amazing. 50 years later, they are expecting 60-plus members of that team. That is incredible. Incredible stuff. So happy that they are out there and that we can celebrate this team. Of course, we'll celebrate the 13 and 14 Big 12 championship teams later on in the season, but it's important as Baylor gets more national, you get more kids like me coming from way out of state to appreciate the heritage of this program and those that laid the foundation. So very happy to see that. Let me know what you think about this 74 Southwest Conference team, what you think about the running back situation, and was Dave Aranda right? Is this defense not all it's cracked up to be yet? Drop that down in the comments below. I really appreciate the engagement you guys have been having in the comment section. Keep it coming. It really helps. It actually really helps me. It gets the video out to more people. It's just how YouTube's algorithm works. So leave any comment in there. I don't care what it is. Go ahead. Say how much you hate me. I don't care. Put that down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified anytime we're dropping a video on YouTube. And every time we're doing that, we're also dropping it wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll see you after the game on Locked On Baylor.